Hi everyone. This presentation is quite a lot of recycling in this, where I'm just going to talk a little bit about EBUKI and the kind of work that we do, but also where we came from and where we perhaps could be going. And it was great to hear Alice and Felix saying, oh, we just could make an Earth place for young people in the centre of London. Yeah, absolutely. And we'd be definitely up for that. So EBUKI, where we come from is that back in the early 2000s, there were a lot of people working in Earth all around the country in all sorts of different ways, in academia and on sites, and all very separated and kind of somewhat alienated. And there was some little bright spots where you could go to CAT and meet some other people that were doing and thinking similar kinds of things. And certain universities, Bath University in particular, made a space for some of these materials. But essentially, it was a lot of people working in quite isolated ways. And so there was this thing really that the Earth is just out there, and some people are using it, but it doesn't really have much of a voice. And this was actually something that came up from a participant earlier in the day, who speaks for the Earth. So this is a bit of a recycled slide from the Cobboge project, where we just found the EPC data for England and Wales, and every little dot is a Earth building that has been sold or rented between 2005 and 2016. So there is a lot of Earth in England, Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland, and there are also a lot of Earth buildings. They just are kind of invisible to a high percentage of the population. So 15 years ago, we had a meeting in central London and a lot of people came. There were three of us really that sort of agreed that we should have the meeting, and then we each agreed that we would invite the people that we knew in our circle to come and have that meeting. And so there was an agreement that the Earth did need a voice, but it was not quite clear what the direction would be. And in some ways, I think that has become a little bit clearer in the intervening time. But without having a forum, a space to talk about these things, it is quite difficult to gain a direction and gain a sense that the direction is where most of those people want to be going. And so just initially, what we could agree was that we would have events. And at that point, events meant a day like this, in a space with people showing images and talking about those images. And the twist on it was that the day after, we'd go for a tour of the local area and we would look at the local vernacular and the more modern buildings in that space. And so you couldn't have the conference in the same place year after year, because you would always be looking then at Devon longhouses and never at East Anglian lump houses. So it moved around and we went to a number of different places. And then about 10 years ago, we were introduced to the kind of European network of Earth building organizations. And that's a thing that exists, and we play a part in that, and we meet with them on a quarterly basis, and they drew us into some of their nefarious ideas, and that really helped shape our thinking about what we were doing and why we were doing it. And that also meant that we were invited to the French Clay Fest, which is very different to the English Clay Fest, but it was a very inspiring thing. And there's a lot of very inspiring things across the European network. And we've had Marco here from Estonia this week, just with a completely different approach to the development of markets and materials and processes that people here would look at and think, oh, could do that. And that's great. That's really what sort of needs to happen. And so we started to work on more policy types of things, moving away from just this event and networking idea to thinking about, well, we've heard little bits of it all through today about the kinds of restrictions that there are on using these materials and using the processes, the market restrictions and the regulations and the lack of confidence in many of the users and designers, lack of knowledge, lack of skills. And so we worked on training standards with the European network, and so then 5 years ago we'd established training norms in Europe, the ECVET system, and we brought it into the UK National Occupational Standard and NVQ, and we trained a couple of assessors in Scotland and in England, and all the time you're sort of feeling like, oh, we really are arriving now, we really are arriving, and then you discover that actually you need an accrediting body for the assessor to be accredited by, and then you'll run into the kind of bureaucracies of a very poorly funded further education system that we have in this country. And none of this kind of stuff really happens by one small company or even one big company. This is the work of a network of people working together with a different set of understandings. That's what, at least that I can see very clearly, that it's very difficult to be taking your beautiful plaster making machine on site every day and digging out clay and making plasters and making up mixes, and then starting to try and think about designing a training standard and getting traction to put that through the bureaucratic processes that form training and education in this country, or really in any country. And so this really points to for me, this really points to the need, the requirement for network organizations to work together. I told you that I didn't have any exciting pictures, and I don't. So along with the training and the training standards and training for trainers, we're also drawn in as industry partners to materials research. It's been mentioned, the Keable project. And then prior to our self-ejection, we were part of the Erasmus program network, and we could apply for money, and we could send learners to the European network and gain a lot of knowledge and confidence in, I say, a wider range of skills and competence than that is available here. And also give people a sense that there are other people doing these things in other places. And that's kind of, I think, very important, that we hear voices from the Thai-Burma border or wherever it may be, that we're not an island separated from the rest of the world, because no person is an island. And all of these things connect to these very funny words like sustainability, and we've been thinking about those things and how the passive house design standard can work with natural material and the processes involved in that. And yeah, as I say, we've been working as industry partners with academic organizations. And that's an invaluable role, because academics are really smart at a lot of things and not so good at others. And that kind of interaction with a certain kind of reality in a construction industry actually requires people that are actually in a construction industry. And again, we sort of have this ability to be that body, to make that connection. And because of that, we've become the UNESCO partner in the UK to the Chair on Earthen Architecture. And a lot of people don't know that that thing exists, but 2 weeks ago I was in France listening to people talking about education in Earth from right the way across South America and from China and from Europe and from Africa and from the US. And these are processes that don't necessarily happen if you are a local rammed earth builder. You have to actually have that unity, that group, to be able to make those things happen. We know that we can transfer skills, and we've just had a fantastic week back at Clayfest. It's our 10th Clayfest, our 6th one in the field. We've had a fairly painful break, which has given us the opportunity to discover the wonders of Zoom and to have speakers from around the world. Lost Fiona, but we've had a beautiful speaker from Egypt and from South Africa and from California, things that wouldn't be much more difficult here in person. But it's not quite the same thing as having something in your hand. And as I said, we went from the learning outcomes into thinking about training trainers, because we've got university department upon university department full of architects and engineers and construction management experts and surveyors and material scientists and a whole gamut of incredible skills and knowledge that know absolutely nothing about clay. And so when we go and train the learners in those places, and the learners turn to their teaching training staff and say, what about that? What was Becky saying? They shake their heads sadly because they don't know anything. And it's only by giving them that little bit of knowledge and that little bit of skills so that they're half a step ahead of their learners that you can then have an extraordinarily rich conversation. And we've now seen that at the AA and at UCL and in Edinburgh. And it's a kind of a program that I think that we will continue to try and roll out. So we've taken there's an amazing set of codes of practice from the French Association and translated them into English. We're still trying to finalize that work, but this really is the core of the work that's been produced by that European network, this ECVET Earth, European Community Vocational Education and Training. And within this website, you have the units of learning outcomes. This is not a training program. It doesn't matter how you trained. It's just really a checklist of what you need to know. And all of those things are downloadable. And if you need them in Spanish, they're also there. And if you speak Chinese, we'd be very happy to hear from you that you would put it into Chinese and we would put it onto the website. And this has been for me anyway, it's been a very transformative process, because when we began, there was a sense amongst a lot of the participants, 8 countries, that the culture and the practice of earth building in Portugal could not really be reconciled with that of Slovakia. Okay. But as we worked through the processes we saw that there were smaller and smaller gaps between those 2 great cultures and all of the others, and that was a really amazing thing to see. And what it produced was this most exciting slide that you're going to see today. Knowledge and skills, from raw materials to mix, building with earth. What more could you need? And the point about all of these is that they are put into levels. This is levels 3 and 4, which is the European qualifications framework, which is how most higher and further education is thought about in this country. And levels 3 and 4 are the most intense. There is the most information in those. And so this is why we specifically chose to look at levels 3 and 4, because levels 3 and 4 is about autonomy. Because when Will goes on site, or Anna goes on site, or when Glenn goes on site, they are autonomous. They know what they're doing. Of course, they learn and they listen as they go along, but they don't really need to be told how to do the job, and they can instruct others. So you can, as the French charmingly put it, you can undress these and take out the depth of this and make a level 1 and 2 quite easily, much more easily than going from 1 and 2 to 3 and 4. But also you can undress them to level 7, which is where the architects and the engineers sit. Because the architects and the engineers massively benefit from putting their hands into the material. And I think we've sort of very much seen that again this week with the workshops, with people putting their hands in the materials and tentatively scraping a little bit of clay across a wall and discovering, oh, I can actually do that, and that it becomes a much realer thing. But they don't need that deep intensity. And this then becomes I've said it's not a training manual, but it becomes a checklist of what you need to be thinking about. It's big, and it's been unrolling into South America and into Africa, and it works in those places too. And it involves writing exams and doing practicals. And it involves then us taking it to our own national organisation, the CITB. Apologies, Will, for the acronym-laden talk that I'm giving, but the National Occupational Standard is what you need to describe any particular skill or career. And so we put the ECVET work into the National Occupational Standard, and then a couple of years ago we were asked to review that 6 years later, and we then made it a much, much more robust document. We put a lot more information in it, and Ben Carrington, who was here this week training, who's very much a Lyme expert, said to me quite clearly that the Earthnos is a much more stable document than the Lyme-NOS. And that is really the work of collaborating with 8 other countries. That's what you get. 3 minutes, God, okay. So I'm just trying to give you the sense that there's a depth of what needs to happen and what has happened. And the reason that it's happened is that we have a network organization. And it came 2 nights ago. We sat a small group of us around a fire in a field just to kind of review where everybody was, because we've been in our own little bubbles for the last 4 years. We haven't been together like this, and it became harder and harder for me to have the sense that anybody else has the sense that this is a necessary thing that we do. But it felt like that conversation really pointed to the idea that maybe it is a necessary thing, and that actually, if you just left this to individual architecture firms or individual engineers or individuals with skills in plastering, if you just left it to them, or indeed to the academics, that you wouldn't actually get as far as we have got. Because one of the things that we need to be doing, so I'm just going to pass by guidelines and energy standards and building specifications and all of the work that we've achieved, and also the networks that we've created, both at a national level and at a local level, and at a European level and at a global level, also including the UNESCO chair, and passing quickly by the idea that we need to manipulate language in order to allow people an easier way into this whole strange world, which feels quite dissociated to inner city young dwellers. But what is the next 5 years? You know, if we don't think about the next 5 years, if we don't have a program for the next 5 years, and we just kind of muddle along, then we'll get somewhere or other. But if we actually had a program, then it would be clear in 5 years whether we've achieved that or not. And what is that? So for me, amongst other things, coordination through the UNESCO chair to bring the universities in this country together and agree that they need to have a more unified program so that all of the students are getting some more of these kinds of materials and processes, that we establish training at higher and further education levels, and that we review and expand the ECFET system, because we just did levels 3 and 4, we didn't do light earth, we didn't, a lot of different things that needs to happen, and also at level 7. And properly embed the NVQ qualifications, because part of the problem that we have is this accreditation issue. And then in 10 years, where are we going to be in 10 years? Are we just going to kind of look back and say, well, yeah, we had that organization, but didn't really sort of seem to do very much, and they had these boring Zoom meetings once a month, which we couldn't really be asked to go to, and yeah, they had an event once a year, but really once a year isn't a great thing, is it? You know, and or maybe you know, you've got an idea and you've got something to bring. Felix and Alice, because just to finish, it really started because 3 of us were at a conference where we were backed into a corner by the head of the German association, quite a fearsome character. And he backed us into the corner and he said, where is the UK association? And you know, we're all sort of British and a bit sort of deferential, and we said, well, and then after 4 years, we actually managed to get one together. He was the head of the association in Germany for 30 years. And I will not be that man. Thanks very much.